Bazuyo Harriet, who is the Coordinator National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. We also do have Joel Lutimba Lumala. Enable is the Belgian Agency for International Cooperation, both with us in studio to understand this concept of business. Let us understand it together. Let us learn, unlearn and relearn. 0709 602 592. Send a WhatsApp message and engage and be part of the conversation. A very good morning to you, Joel. It's a pleasure having you this morning.
Good morning, Juliet.
Right. Harriet, good morning.
Good morning to you, Juliet.
It's a pleasure having you this morning.
Thank you. We're honored.
Right. And I'll start with Harriet, asking you for what it is and what it means for our viewer.
Thank you so much. Good morning, viewers. My name is Harriet from Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and I coordinate the Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. So in a programming sense, when you talk about business and human rights, we're simply talking about the relationship or interaction between businesses and human rights, because we know that sometimes people understand business as a profit-making venture, while people understand human rights as something personal. But then to us at programming level, we know that there are a lot of interactions between businesses on one side and how they also affect human rights or rights of the people. It could be community, it could be consumers, it could be workers, it could even be just an ordinary. So in that sense, that is largely what we are talking about.
Interesting. Very interesting perspective you share there. Now, let me come to you, Joel. Enable, of course, Harriet is from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and that is, in a way, it sort of speaks into her interest in human rights, but business at the same time. Now, how does Enable business and human rights environment?
Thank you, Juliet. As Harriet has said, in relation to the Business and Human Rights National Action Plan that was designed by the government of Uganda, the government of Uganda was putting in an effort to say the UN, the United Nations, have put forward guiding principles on business and human rights. In this looks like for a business to act responsibly, to respect human rights. And in that sense, countries internationally had to then take on the task of transposing these international guiding principles into, frameworks at the national level. Those frameworks could be laws, those frameworks could be plans. And plans in this case are a form of contextualizing as we plan for law. And what we saw is that Uganda took the direction of the National Action Plan, which was endorsed in 2021, as Harriet has said. And with that direction, part of that is an anticipation for the government to implement it. And that's where we come into the agency for the Belgians. And Enable comes in to not only support, but also to participate in the implementation of this plan. So we are working on an EU-funded. The project at its core is aiming at implementation of the National Action Plan. Implementation,
very key and profound at that, because it's very pertinent that these policies become action points and are implemented at the end of the day. Harriet, at the start, of course, within the preamble you shared what a business and human rights environment looks like, and superficially one would sort of peek into why the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development picks interest in this. But delve deeper, take us deeper. What is the perspective and interest of the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development when it comes to human rights that they interplay?
Business and human rights, we all know Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development is the lead institution in social protection, community empowerment, but also specifically the vulnerable categories of people. So for the action plan on business and human rights, maybe to quickly highlight what It was adopted in 2021 in response to our international obligation arising from the UNGPs, and it was part of the recommendation that Uganda willingly accepted through the Universal Peer Review recommendations. So this action plan, it was put in place not only by Ministry of Gender, in much as we're the lead agency, but we had a number of 15 government institutions that worked together, among others, the Ministry of Foreign the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Equal Opportunities Commission. Action plan, before we look at what is achieved, we will possibly look at what we were looking at or what areas we intended to achieve. So this action plan prioritized 8 priority areas, one on land rights and natural resources. We looked at labor rights, we looked at environment, we looked at social service delivery by the private actors, because we have seen that increasingly private actors are also part of those delivering services, and they interact a lot with human rights perspectives. We also looked at tax exemptions, corruption, and transparency. This came from the business entities during our consultations. They also said that indeed, whereas you're looking at human rights violations, it's not only businesses who perceivably violate human rights, but also there are things within business settings which are not being properly done. Then we also looked at access to remedy, that yes, if rights have been violated in business sense, what can then be done to be able to vulnerable women, vulnerable and marginalized communities in sense of businesses. So from this implementation, we have quite achieved a number. I will say that one thing is the mere realization that there's actual linkages between human rights and businesses, how they can be protected and how both can coexist in order to ensure that communities benefit, but also businesses thrive on. Our interest is not really to suppress any of the groups, but to try to promote how both can coexist meaningfully and be able to benefit. But we have also seen engagements between the ministry and other institutions, including the business institutions themselves and the private sector, as well as development partners, in the interest of promoting businesses, as well as also enhancing human rights. And through this action plan, we have also seen a number of businesses who have actually established human rights desks to be able to promote human rights and mainstream the human rights principles within their processes, right from the inception of a business to its conceptualization, implementation effects. But we have also seen laws being triggered because of the business and human rights, and particularly so we have really seen that it is a good thing. It is a broad guiding document, and it has also brought together a number of human rights protection from perspective of business institutions.
All right, so you have actually indeed seen the impact of it.
Yeah.
Yes,
allow me ask Joel, from the side of one who monitors the implementation, who's focused on the implementation as enable, what impact have you seen?
Mandate that the Ministry of Gender has, you know, being the mother of this document. All projects, there needs to be a definition of, you know, project scope and what it is that you're going to engage on. And specifically for Enable, Enable as a development agency is really coming in support. And for us, the support that we are bringing on board is the support that covers about, you know, specific areas within, you know. And for us, the project, which is Advancing Respect for Human Rights by Businesses in Uganda, the project is specifically looking at a couple of sectors, right? And regions. So specifically the sectors, we're looking at mining, oil and gas, we're looking at fisheries,
right.
We are also looking at floriculture, and we are looking at sugar at the sugar industry. Those are our 5. And the project scope spans 11 districts and 1 city. So in Kampala Metropolitan, we're looking at Kampala, the capital city. We're looking at Mukono, Wakiso. In Busoga, we are looking at Iganga, Bugweri, Bujiri, and Mayuge. And in the Albertine, we are looking at Masindi, Hoima, Chiriandongo, Chikube, and Bulisa. And this is what we are looking at in terms of our scope. And the end of the 3rd year of implementing this project. And indeed, as Harriet is saying, the impact has been massive. So it depends even really on what impact you're looking at, because the project supports the state to fulfill its duty to protect human rights.
Right.
And the project also supports businesses, private sector. How can private sector respect, fulfill that corporate responsibility to respect human rights? Very different from CSR. And
how so? I mean, delve deeper.
On what's the difference here?
Yes.
So, in the coming up, the history that backs bringing on or bringing out in the international frameworks the emphasis on businesses have a responsibility to respect human rights is a history that looks at the fact that the human rights framework has constantly looked at 2 entities, right? Constantly looked at the state, the idea that the state could do something to you, right? So there is impact that is expected. The state can help you enjoy your rights, but the state could also harm you. There's also recognition of you as a singular human being, that you have an ability to harm another human being. So there's that recognition in the international framework. But we know consistently that in the history of implementation, what we have known is that businesses have an impact, but the framework was not seeing what happens when a business does this thing. Do we call them state? Do we call them an individual? And so the business and human rights framework, if I produce a product that you consume and that product, say, gives you indigestion and now you end up in the hospital, that is harm that I've caused you. If I come into your area and I am going to mine because there are resources we've discovered there, and I come and simply evict you, that I am taking away your access to land, your livelihood, and that's an impact, not by an individual natural person, but by this business.
Right,
and so what the business and human rights framework brings out is that businesses have a corporate responsibility to respect these rights, that there are rights that are already, a business simply has the task to respect. And that involves, doing no harm, preventing harm, and in the instance that something goes wrong, making sure that there's access to remedy, like Harriet said. And so for us, as Harriet was saying, what we are seeing is that with this project, we have an increased in the project areas themselves, but amongst the different regions in the country, we also have an increased awareness because we are engaging with businesses themselves, from small scale all the way to multinational, and including also private sector bodies such as business member organizations for these different sectors. And what we are learning is that there's a hunger for the knowledge, because in the international landscape there's an increased need for, are you respecting rights? Is this coffee sourced from a place that doesn't have child labor? When we get these minerals, does it mean that the workers in that area are well paid? It's not forced labor. The need to answer these questions. Right. And so the project really has come in to bridge and make sure that they have an understanding of what these requests mean and how they align to be this concept of business and human rights.
Right, indeed. You are watching Good Morning Uganda, The Extra. And this morning we are looking at a beautiful concept, one that might not come easy to see or might not easily be seen to you, but actually exists and requires sensitization, like the team I'm having in studio this morning to give us an awareness of its existence, that is business and human rights existing in your consumer. In one way or the other, there is a human right that you are supposed to enjoy, of course coming along with a duty therein, but it comes because there is business in your end. 0709602592 to send a WhatsApp message and ask that question. I do have my guests in studio to speak into this, and that is Asibazuyo Harriet, who is the Coordinator National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and Joel Lutimba Lumala, who is the Business and Human Rights Officer at International Corporation, and they're both speaking to us regarding business and human rights. Now, Joel, Harriet, Harriet, what does the future look like for Uganda? And I think from the foundation of it, I'm even looking at sensitization and awareness. How far and how more relatable is this conversation going to be moving forward, and altogether what the future looks like?
Thank you so much, Juliet. Just for clarity, this action plan has been in place for 5 years. Rights by Businesses project that has been in place for 3 years. Action plan, but we have funding, but also with other development partners prior to the coming in on board of the EU-funded project. However, we are grateful and appreciative that indeed the project has been a booster to us in the implementation of the action plan. To look into the future, at the moment we are undertaking evaluation of the action plan, because since 5 years it's supposed a month away, and we are glad that we are doing the evaluation at exactly 5 years to try to see what documented evidence is there, and if we need to go into have in place action plan 2, and what will be our priority areas, because we have highlighted the 8 priority areas that we have been implementing across board and nationally, but then we want to see through the evaluation whether we achieved all the 8 significantly, or we still need more investment in either any or all the 5, but also including others. Because I already see from our engagements, stakeholder engagements, we are talking about bringing now ICT, the AI, and the business processes on board. So that means that we're likely to have also change our priority areas to align with the contemporary issues which are being experienced. But also looking into the future, we indeed see that there's a lot of excitement among the businesses to respect human rights. Most times when we go to engage them one-on-one throughout the processes, because most times when we talk about business and human rights, people quickly conclude that we're talking about labor rights, which actually partly, yes, there's a labor right, but it's not entirely labor right, because we look at the community from the consultation, from the access to their resources, because most of these businesses operate on land. So we look at how fairly you are acquiring the land, and also how sustainable you are guaranteeing livelihoods. And indeed, their impact being realized. Recently, we were just in Kakira. First of all, responsibility that they have been fulfilling, but then we task them that beyond that you need to have a human rights framework in place, a policy, a commitment statement, which next time when we come we'll be glad to look through, which does not only address labor rights but also for agriculture, marketing, packaging, and so forth. And they were really very supportive. And many other organizations of this nature or business entities are actually giving those tangible commitments. So we are hoping that in the nearest future we're going to have where all the businesses are cognizant of human rights, and also the communities are cognizant of their obligations towards both the community and the businesses.
Right. Now, Joel, let's look at the role of NGOs. From your vantage as Enable, allow me point you to this aspect, to this question, sorry. In your view, what is the role, do you think, the role of NGOs in helping governments, communities, companies implement the goals that are put on paper
in the National Action Plan. Juliet, perhaps also just to indicate a thanks before I respond to that.
Right.
You really do pronounce my name very well. I appreciate it. You're the first person who can pronounce properly that it's Lutimba Lumala. Our entities that are supporting NGOs are the watchdog for our, you know, how do we enjoy our liberties, our human rights? Right. NGOs are giving us this outlook, and so they play a critical role in the ecosystem of the country. But for civil society organizations, economic rights, which is dealing again with social and economic rights on a broader scope. We have the Collaboration for International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa, CIPESA, which is dealing then with the digital aspects and, you know, all the aspects in relation to how can businesses respect your digital rights, so your rights online. Then we have the Resource Rights Africa, which is dealing specifically with aspects of natural resource governance and advocacy for communities. And lastly, we have the Africa Center for Energy and Mineral Policy, ASEMP, which has a focus again also on specifically leaders, local leaders and communities to make sure that they are able to, you know, in terms of access or benefiting from the mineral resources that are available in the country. It's part of the work that they do. And what we know for sure from this is that we know that civil societies need to be supported to do this work. So just using the Africa Center for Energy and Mineral Policy as an example here, is part of their work is to support local leaders, right? One is to understand as local leaders, what does it look like when you are to support your community to benefit from the minerals that you have? When you are paying attention to communiques from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, part of what they've communicated is that indeed Uganda is the Pearl of Africa. A mineral benefits for communities. What does it mean to be responsible for communities' livelihood? If, you know, knowing that local leaders have to, communities are consulted such that there's free, prior and informed consent before access to this land that a mining company may come into. But also this awareness that communities are natural resources. They have to realize, what does it look like for me as a community member to figure out how to benefit from these resources? Go. And we have we have Rwenzori Rare Metals as a company. Those communities then have to figure out how to interact with the company, how to coalesce around issues that they share, and how to also speak upon concerns that they may have. And so the Africa Center for Energy and Mineral Policy has, is an NGO that then supports those communities to figure that out. Does a community need a trust? How does the community navigate community development agreements that are provided for in our Mining Act of 2022? And this support that doesn't stop on sensitization but walking the journey along means that NGOs are playing a critical role. Just looking at the example of the mineral sector in this instance. And I think that is something we cannot lose, that importance of supporting us to realize our civil liberties, but also our human rights, respect for those rights. And I think there's a lot of NGOs doing a lot of work, not just our grantees, and many NGOs, FIDA Uganda, the Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability, a good number of NGOs are doing a lot of work. And there's a credit to how, they get communities to enjoy respect for their rights.
And that is very profound. You actually talked about CIPESA, and they do have an Internet Governance Week. That alone is, and it's open for the public, where you ought to know your rights in public, rather in internet access. Who has your data? So when you give that picture, it makes a lot of sense.
A lot, and they do actually have a digital rights toolkit now, which they've done as part of the project, a digital rights toolkit for businesses to figure out what does it look like for a business to respect human rights? And the toolkit is outlining what are digital rights that a business needs. What does that look like if I'm a business that is taking biometrics, you know, finger recognition, signing, you know, devices that are utilized? What does respect? And I'm saying I'm an online shop, give me your number, your location, how are you protecting my data? And CIPESA actually has a toolkit that can assist with this, that you know, that is available on their website, but also they are, you know, creating spaces where they can teach businesses how to utilize the toolkit in real time.
Right. Yeah. Harriet, allow me also to tap into the same question, but from the end now of government. Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. How has this come to life? Just paint a picture of, you know, reality or reality brought some of these things to life, as Joel has rightly shared the importance of NGO.
Have worked a lot together with the civil society organizations right from the development of this action plan on business and human rights. I'm sure we have been very interacting on daily basis, like with the NGOs like Resource Rights Africa, ISA Initiative for done a lot. They have contributed towards our work as government. They're actually enhancing what government is doing. So they have put a lot of energy into child labor. Most times I'm aware you have perhaps seen it during child labor days. There are good statistics, research that they have undertaken. They have actually also supported and taken on some government colleagues on a benchmarking exercise. For example, they were in Ghana trying chain can be replicated in Uganda. But also a lot of their energy has been in the mineral. I know like Resource Rights Africa and other partners at NGOs at grassroots, they have actually been in Karamoja, the mining areas, trying to educate the public through the puppet shows to try to see how they can mobilize communities to be able to understand if they are violated. Are the things that they need to be doing to support their report to come to fulfillment, but also how they can just follow through the processes for access to remedy. But they have also, together with us, of course, invested in alternative access to remedy in terms of grievance redress mechanisms, because we appreciate that there could be thousands and tons of issues reported to court, but then seeing that the courts are already overloaded with communities to have structures, and they have engagement platforms where the civil society facilitates or provides an environment where the businesses and the community can actually engage and resettle. But of course, there's also the research and publicity. They have brought several good researches into our attention, what government can then do to be able to take it forward. But also most times we have also guided them through the approaches that they can facilitate effective communication between the government and they themselves are civil society, but also to have the interests of the community at hand. So for me, out of this project, but also out of the Business and Human Rights Initiative, I could say that actually businesses, I mean the civil society organizations have worked hand in hand with the government to be able.
Yes, surely indeed. What a way to make an awareness of how we all have a role to play. But in particular today, in case you're just joining in, we are looking at business and human rights. You're running that business, consuming that internet, seeing that mine or some form of work going on, or even you're part of it. But do you know your rights? Are you aware that you are supposed to have rights therein. This is what we've been chewing on, and it's a beautiful conversation that I for one, has allowed me to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that is the goal of UBC, to inspire Uganda, believing for the same for you, that there has been a point of learning, unlearning, and relearning. Starting with you, Joel, what are your parting shots?
Parting shots. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. We really, really appreciate it that we get to speak more on business and human rights. National Action Plan may be coming to an end, the first National Action Plan for the country. Harriet will be able to guide us on whether Uganda is going to have a second National Action Plan or what Uganda is pursuing in terms of, legislating in this regard.
Right.
But the first thing that I'd like to say is that business and human rights is very pertinent. What we have learned from the conversations that we have had, the trainings, the sensitizations, the unique engagements that have been done, both with individual businesses, but also with business member organizations in the country, either sectoral business member organizations or overarching business member organizations. What we have learned is that Uganda is really, really interested on making a mark on the international market. And businesses and private sector are also interested in contributing to making this mark. What they are seeing is that the international landscape is increasingly requiring that businesses have respect for human rights. That may be appearing in different lingo as sustainability, environmental social governance as ESG. That may be appearing in different forms. But that means that what the government of Uganda is aiming for and what private sector wants to do are aligned. And we know that if there's respect for human rights, companies out there, countries out there that are looking for our products that have been produced in the most sustainable ways, in the most second, the opportunity to learn about business and human rights, to figure out how it fits within your business and how it impacts your access to market, whether it's regionally or nationally or even internationally, because there's definitely say that the project Advancing Respect for Human Rights by Businesses, which is implemented by the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development and Enable, the project has resources that are aimed to help you along this journey. We do have a concept video on YouTube that gives you a brief on what business and human rights is. We have a business and human rights e-learning course. Yes, and it's still accessible on the Enable website. But we also have book resources that are a business and human rights resource book that is supposed to be utilized by any entity depending on what your need is. And I'd like to encourage you, whoever you are, an individual, a business member organization, that this is the opportunity to take up, to find the resources and learn. And we will be here to support.
All right.
Thank you.
My pick up from that submission, Joel, is that YouTube video where there are a lot of videos that have the concept, teaching about the concept of up into this. Yeah. That's rather profound. Harriet, what are your parting shots? Yes, I know.
But my parting shots are that from business and human rights perspective, and having driven this initiative for some time now, together with the colleagues, of course, at Ministry of Gender and the management, we realize that there's actually enthusiasm on the protection in their business interactions. Public is now aware. They want to know how they want to be able to achieve their rights. And we have also learned that businesses themselves actually are also positive about enhancing human rights protection within their chains. We have had discussions where we go to meet management of these business entities, and we step behind and listen to them conversing. One says, as it may be farmers, but then later they agree that actually it is not farmers, it is areas. So I feel that the conversation right now is very good, and it is encouraging that we are all looking towards enhancing our positive business environment for the benefit of everyone.
Right.
And we are also looking towards, like Joel tipped earlier, we are hopeful that there will certainly be an NAP 2 in place, because there's still, much as a lot of effort has been put in implementing the action plan, but there's still some of the areas that we may need to strengthen further and carry on. So I'll be, possibly next time we'll come here, we'll discuss our evaluation findings and seeing which areas still need more energy and how prepared government is, how we can bring it to the next level.
Right, keeping fingers crossed for that NAP to. Yes, Joe.
Yes. Also, I was listening to Harriet, and I remembered we definitely have an annual forum on this, business and human rights that's coming up also in September.
Right.
I'm interested actually because the ministry is organizing. Harriet can tell us more about it.
Yes, yes, please.
So the Forum on Business and Human Rights is actually an annual event. This is now the 7th time it is going to happen, and it brings together business institutions, government institutions, civil society, project affected persons, the development partners, the international community, because we have had consistent participation from Denmark, and that Uganda has played agenda in Africa, but also global. Events such as this one. So it is an open space, and it's a safe space where we interchange ideas. We both hold ourselves accountable. We present our progress. They also present to us their progress. We identify gaps together, and we set agenda over the next 1 year.
Right.
What is it that we're going to focus on?
Right. We're definitely looking forward to having you back to talk about that conference as well, which is in what, the
10th
September.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for watching the show. I do thank you both for coming through to sensitize us on business and human rights. Been having this conversation with Asibazuyo Harriet, who is the coordinator national action plan, and that is on business and human rights at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, alongside Joel Lutimba Lumala, who is the business and human rights officer, who just definitely give me my flowers for pronouncing his name right. But he is coming from Enable. Enable is the Belgian agency for international cooperation. Thank you for watching UBC TV, inspiring Uganda for God and my country. Good morning.
Thank you.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra. Pick of the day.
Broadcaster.
Was brought to you by
I'll call you every day, yeah, yo, baby, don't know.
You can now get all the